Live. Live, 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 live. We are live. Okay?
Some of us are.
That's right. Some of us more than others.
Yep.
Look, it before anything else, SOS conference 2224. It's getting serious. It's getting crunch time. SaveOurSites.com. We're still uh, getting people to buy tickets. We're still getting sponsors, even though somehow we're beyond the cutoff date for sponsors. Yet two new sponsors recently joined, and then one or two more I think are interested right now. So I don't know. We're gonna have to cut that off soon too. But I'm looking right now live at the tickets. By the way, we're gonna be discussing, like you read in this description, an FDA warning letter. So those are always fun. People like juicy stuff. This was sent to me by someone. I think this might be a regular thing. Just read
Warning
FDA
letters.
warning letters like maybe once a month, once a week. I don't know. I don't know. It's last one I did solo. Then I had Darshan on a little bit, and now this one I was like, I was waiting for Brad's live, but it didn't happen today, so felt like going live.
Well, Darshan would certainly be a good guest for a warning letter.
Well, he already was, so now we got to give our own opinions as site owners, right? And by the way, guys, what makes this even better? Me and Chris have not read this yet, so we don't know if it's gonna be good, bad, boring. I have no clue. But let's get into it. Here's the warning letter. Antonio Blanco. So Dr. Blanco from Vista Health Research. I don't, you know, I don't know if I feel right about like publicly shaming people, but I think I, there's like a educational component of this that I think is important. I mean, these are public. The point is not to publicly shame. And on the last one, I refrained from even using the name. This one, it's live, so I read it by accident, but that's not the point. I don't know anything about this PI. What we do know is that majority of PIs don't have PI oversight, so this should be a warning letter for all you guys and gals watching.
Hey, it's in
Right?
Miami.
Yeah,
I like where it's at. Miami. Go figure.
right. So here's the warning letter, okay, and we're gonna go through like issue by issue. And one thing Darshan pointed out to me is like these warning letters just show the most serious things they found. They don't show like every single issue. They just show the more serious of the issues that the FDA found. Uh, and I lost Chris, but maybe we'll get him back.
Chris is here.
Okay, you're all right. Okay.
You got a cold.
So again, these warning letters, they're just a summary of like the most important things the FDA found. It's not like a CRA action items and all that. So whatever you see, there's a lot more underneath it, says Darshan. Okay,
But,
so
but
look at this.
but these things that are underneath are minor. Probably findings that are found at every site, right? Something like that. I assume is what Darshan said.
I assume that too.
Okay.
Um, but these would be the ones that would constitute the actual warning letter.
Yeah.
So this, first of all, the FDA doesn't just come to your site for 20 days, 19 days, unless they have a reason to be there.
That's a whole hell of a long time for the FDA to be your
Well, you
site.
missed the last warning letter one. It was 30 days on site.
Oh my goodness, I could not even imagine.
So what Darshan said, what's going on there, and we'll confirm at SOS, Pat Stone will be there. Patrick Stone, former FDA auditor, confirmed he will be there. Is that when they stay that long, the FDA's been there before, and they've found similar issues on shorter stints, and they're still having similar issues, on repeat audits.
So I would also assume, I definitely could be incorrect, but I would make the assumption that they're looking at numerous studies, not just one,
Yeah,
for
so
30
it's right
days.
here, protocol B4. So for this one, it was just one protocol.
Okay. But
But
30 days, that's a long time. You can get through probably a couple studies in 30 days, I would assume.
for that study, for that previous audit that you guys can watch or listen to, it was the main study and the extension study.
Okay.
So the thing here is this is what Darshan pointed out because luckily I've never had FDA audit.
Knock on
Uh,
wood here.
yeah. Well, I mean, this is one of the reasons we're doing these warning letters is to learn ourselves too, right? Like
Sure.
I know I go back and apply it to the site, and you guys should be as well. This is not when they stay this long again from Darshan, and I trust him and Pat Stone. This is not a one-time audit. This is not like the first audit. Like the first audit, usually they'll stay 1 or 2 days. Then they'll give them reason to like, hey, make sure these are fixed. And then if they see like years later, hey, the same issues going on, well, they're gonna come back and stay longer. So, anyways, let's get into it. Apparently, it's just one protocol so far. As long as we see B4, it's one protocol. Here's the subject are B6. So that's how they differentiate. But protocol is still one protocol, B4. So 19 days, right? And by the way, if you guys have comments, Becky says that's a long visit, poor staff. I agree. That's a very
Completely
long
agree.
visit.
I
Poor staff.
completely agree.
I wonder how many quit like halfway through that audit.
And I wonder,
Probably high enrollment.
how often the PI is expected to be available during those 19 days.
I mean, probably at the beginning and the end. I mean, I don't know. They're not mandated anything, so
Well, I
it's
know, but I'm
probably in the
sure.
PI's best interest to want to be there.
Sure, and I'm sure the FDA does have an expectation. I just like a CRA, it's at the end of their visit, right? So, um,
I don't
I'm
think the
just wondering.
FDA has actual expectations, though.
Okay,
I think by the time they audit, they're just looking at whether you should continue to do research or not. And receiving a warning letter is essentially a scarlet letter.
oh yeah.
I mean, it's not officially a ban from research.
Well, it can be,
Right, but this warning letter is not officially a ban from research.
right?
This is just a warning letter. The FDA can only do that in like cases of fraud or like complete negligence.
Okay,
But
so
for all essential purposes, this is a ban because sponsors all ask, have you received any warning letters? And basically, you're not getting a study.
right.
So Clara says probably high enrollment, lots of ICFs to look at. Well, let's see, Clara. Let's not jump the gun because I haven't looked at this either. So, and neither has Chris. And I'm hoping this PI is not a client of ours. Do you think so? I don't
well,
think
well, if he is, he's not going to need our services anymore, anyhow.
so. Oh, that's a good one. Chris got one in. Good joke, man. All right. Hopefully, guys and gals, you learn from this. Okay. So, at the conclusion of the inspection, the investigator Light, which is the FDA investigator, presented and discussed the form 483. We acknowledge receipt of your February 17th written response. From our review, the FDA establishment inspection report, the documents submitted with that report, it appears that you did not adhere to the applicable statutory requirements in the CFR. So let's just skip all that. You failed to ensure that the investigation was conducted according to the protocol, which is CFR 312.60 for those of you nerds that care. Uh, so, Protocol B4, certain inclusion criteria need to be met before enrollment into the study. In addition, this protocol required you perform certain safety procedures at specific time points. You failed to adhere. Specifically, the following subjects were randomized without any documentation of surgical diagnosis of whatever condition they are, or established by visualization or histology within 10 years before the subject's entry into the washout period.
So, I'm going to go off on a tangent real quick, just because I was
Please
confused.
don't. I have a call at top of the hour.
I was confused a little bit, so I googled what's the difference between a warning letter and a 483, which basically confirms what Darshan said. So the 483 is what precedes this. This is the same in line with the 483. 483 is, hey, there's issues here, correct these. The
Right.
warning letter is, okay, this is severe because you're not taking action on
Right.
what you were previously cited on.
Right.
Okay.
And that would explain why. Thank you, Chris, for confirming what we said 5 minutes ago. But
I
that was
did,
good.
but you
You have
didn't
to
say
fact
any.
check it.
You did not
You
say
have to
anything
fact.
about a 483, so I had to look it up.
Yeah, you have to fact check it. It's good. This way, good man. This is amazing. Fact checkers here. So, yeah, Darshan was right. But this is why, like again, they don't come that long unless it's a repeat
Hmm.
visit, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And apparently, it's the same issues they've had. So, inclusion exclusion criteria, guys. The theme from the last warning letter was there's a difference, at least in the FDA's opinion, between inadvertently looking over, like forgetting to do something, versus knowing you have to do it and still not doing it.
Yeah.
And the FDA does take that into consideration. They don't just want to give warning letters to people. Like you just said, the 483s first.
And even that's a death knell oftentimes in your, if you're the PI in your research
Yeah,
career. So an escalation of that, yeah, definitely, you're done.
definitely, right? But
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So in February, the written response, you acknowledged that subject records were incomplete, but that you believed all subjects met inclusion criteria. You further stated retroactively that you located the surgical reports for 3 subjects and provided copies. In addition, you stated that you were in the process of obtaining surgical reports for the remaining 5 subjects. You also stated that a part of your corrective plan, you will review current procedures. So basically, going through and making sure the IE criteria. And then the FDA says, we acknowledge the actions. However, your written response is inadequate because the 3 surgical reports you provided that document medical encounters and surgical procedures took place or were performed for each of these subjects more than 10 years before the subject's entry into washout, which was a direct exclusion criteria. As such, the documentation does not support the eligibility of subjects. So it looks like 2 subjects. In addition, your response is inadequate because you did not include sufficient details about your corrective action plan. For example, you did not provide sufficient details about the implementation of the proposed procedures and practices being instituted at your site to ensure compliance, particularly subject eligibility. What do we teach all the time, Chris? If you do nothing else, don't randomize patients that don't belong in the study.
Yeah. The 2 worst errors, of course, are not consenting your patient. Don't think it can get worse than that. And then secondary to that would be misrandomizing.
Right. And then in this case, like they knowingly
Or doing it.
are doing it because they've enrolled other patients where they were able to get their records.
Yeah.
Right. It's not like a one-off mistake where, hey, we forgot to check
Yeah.
this level in the plasma, or we did check it, but we failed to see that it's like slightly less than what the protocol allows, and on one patient. I mean, it would be the equivalent of knowing they wouldn't qualify and then still doing it.
Yep. That is what they're doing. I mean, and that's why I laughed or chuckled at the fact that this is to a Miami site. Miami's notorious for this.
Yeah, the last one was a Philadelphia site. Let's pause and go through some of these comments real quick. Somebody says they meet with the PI in the beginning and end of the inspections to debrief.
Okay, that would
But
make
the
sense.
but the Chris point, if you're a PI that's like serious about this, you're meeting with them regularly to show them, hey, okay, yeah, maybe our capital plan didn't do that. I can put something else in place. That like something, showing them something that you're willing to change.
So, you see, I'm not sure that's correct because,
Maybe for your first audit.
well, sponsors tell you, at least as far as I know, they tell you just basically answer yes and no. Do not talk, right? It's outside of pretty much just saying yes and no at these audits. So, as a PI, do you want to be there
Yes.
just constantly and grilled and probably say something, sticking your
Not
foot in your mouth?
constantly, not constantly, but I would make it daily touch points. And you have to think why the sponsor's saying that. The sponsor's saying that to protect themselves, not you.
I suppose that's true. But at the same time, you don't want to offer evidence of something
No,
that
you don't. No, you don't. I didn't say to go in there and like
Have
say
a conversation.
incriminating things. Just go in there and say, hey, what were the findings for today? Okay, we're gonna work to make sure, just like vague stuff, but like give them the idea that you're committed and you have oversight.
Yeah, I can see an argument to both sides, honestly.
I
I,
can too, but I can see why the sponsors would say that otherwise. Hey, the less you say, the better, because it incriminates us less.
yeah, yeah,
This one's gonna cover your face, Chris. I apologize in advance.
yeah. No worries.
Chris is gone. Chris, are you there? Are you there,
Uh,
Chris?
I'm in the
Oh, okay.
stratosphere.
This is like peekaboo with little kids. Chris,
I'm in limbo.
Justin Goodards. Without having read this, that makes three of us, Justin. Does it have to do with duplicate participants? So far, no. Just taking a shot in the dark, but knowing this is a huge issue in research, especially in Florida, sites consistently receive 483 surrounding this issue. Is there any reason why all site sponsors and CROs are not proactively implementing solutions to prevent this?
So when you say duplicate, Justin, when you say duplicate participants, do you mean duplicate for the same study at two different sites, or the same site, same PI, same study? Because I can see that happening too. Hey, we'll just make you a different person.
Yeah. Just don't do it, guys. But that doesn't look like that's in this letter.
No.
Let's just finish these comments real quick and continue. Severe lack of staff oversight in general. How can you enroll anyone without proper documentation? Becky says, wow. Well, happens, Becky. Verified clinical trials can prevent site fraud and duplicate participants. Yeah, I don't think that's anything to do with this, though. But let's see. It's the showing of intent. Thank you, Carol. Exactly what I believe. Was the violation intentional or by chance? Warning letter slash 483. And were there any mitigation efforts to attempt to prevent? So if you guys watching, if you make mistakes like IE criteria mistakes, it's all like the FDA does consider intent. Go
Yep.
back and correct it, file your deviation, and don't repeat it. And don't knowingly do it. Like this case clearly that's what happened. It's unfortunate.
I don't know if it's unfortunate. I mean, I'm sure the PI thinks it was unfortunate he got caught.
I don't know. I don't know the PI. Who knows? A number of things can happen.
If you're intentionally
It
enrolling
could be,
patients,
look, a lot of these SMOs run the business for the PIs.
sorry, man, if you're intentionally enrolling patients that don't qualify intentionally and the FDA is aware of this, yeah, it's your own fault.
It is. But oftentimes, not often, many times these PIs are the victims themselves.
Sure, they have no idea what's going on. And that would kind of, lead back to the other problem in research, and that's principal investigator oversight.
That's right.
So, and that could be the case, but,
A lot
with
of these SMOs, at least the way they used to operate, I mean, you know better than I do, Chris.
yeah,
But yeah, you're right. At the end of the day, you're signing that 1572. You got to know what you're getting into.
what's going on at your site and with your patients.
Shirley says you are not to interact with the inspectors during audits. It distracts them. Well, yeah, Shirley, but if I'm a doctor and my ability to do research is on the line, I'm taking my chance and doing it like strategically. I'm doing it like I'm not doing it like just reactionary, but I'm doing it to show them that I care and I have oversight.
I think the way to go with that would be maybe at the end of each day when they're done, they're packing
Yeah.
up, just to step in the room and say, hey, is there
Yep.
anything I can address that while it's fresh on your mind?
I would agree with that. Yeah.
Don't disturb them throughout the day while they're working.
But don't just like also not be seen for 2 weeks.
That's what I'm saying. At the end of the day, if you're going to go Dan's route, it would be as they're getting ready to leave.
I'd probably do that if I were the PI. I'm not a PI. I will never be a PI. But okay. So this one was about intentionally randomizing when you know you shouldn't have and trying to hide it. The next part was e-diaries. I'm telling you guys and gals, these e-diaries, we are not ready for them. These e-diaries become source. And what essentially happens is anytime you're giving source to patients and you're giving it to them to do on their own, at home, on days that are not visits. We are trained as sites, like the paradigm is when there's a visit, we make sure things are going properly. But when the patient's not here, the e-diary is just going to take care of itself. And we got to, I mean, these are gaining more prevalence. We've got to change this paradigm. My site, we're figuring that out too. Like, hey, we're going to make sure that we take these e-diaries seriously. So the protocol required subjects to have e-diary documentation during the last 35 days before day one to be eligible. So they had to do some e-diary things. It's not telling us what it is. You failed to adhere to this requirement. Specifically, one subject was randomized with 12 days of one diary and 0 days of another. As such, the subject did not have the required e-diary documentation and an average score of whatever it is.
Yeah, so it's a test run. It's to make sure that they're going to complete their diaries throughout the trial before they can randomize. I've been on studies like this.
Something like that, or in pain, they do like placebo washout where they make sure you're like
Yep.
getting rid of placebo responders. In diabetes, you're seeing if their glucose goes above or below a certain level. Like it's a lot of it's safety, and a lot of it, you're right, is
Testing.
compliance and things like
Yeah,
that.
test runs. Well, they were
Right.
80 to 120% compliant, something like that. Generally.
So one of the patients didn't have e-diary entries to support eligibility. In the written response, they indicated that part of the CAPA plan, they will update the periodic review process to verify that subject e-diaries entries include the information required by protocol. This is the part where any site could be guilty of this right here. Like you should have quality, and I'm in the process of redesigning some of our Creo e-source to make sure that we kind of don't run into this issue because it's very tempting to consider these diaries an afterthought, but they are source and it's important. And the FDA is starting to crack down on it. And we're trained as sites. I'm telling you, this is a visit. This is a visit. In between these visits, yeah, they're doing diaries, but those are not visits. Well, we need to figure out how to make sure what the patients are doing. Number one, they're doing it. And number two, that they're doing it properly.
Who was it we were talking to about e-diaries not too long ago? And I believe it was on one of these live shows in
Yeah,
which they were saying sites are well underpaid for what's required to properly maintain an e-diary.
I think he wants to stay off the record right now.
Yeah, but I think they were on live, weren't they? When we
Right, but I'm telling you, he wants to stay off the record maybe right
Okay, so you do know what I'm talking about. And
now.
I think they were saying something like $200-300 per entry or something like that. So I could properly maintain and review, contact the patient for retraining. Just that these e-diaries are very involved, which I don't disagree with. But that's just not what sponsors are paying at this point.
Right. And if we're going to do this paradigm shift, like, I mean, maybe it starts at budgets too, Chris. Like, I don't know. We might have to figure out how to make this align properly. Because we're essentially taking, because of e diary, we're essentially making non visits important, just as important as visits.
Yeah.
But we're not really getting paid for it, right? We're getting paid to like make sure they're eligible.
Hmm.
But the paradigm's broken. I'm telling you, there's something here that just sites are not getting it. And everyone, all of us, it wasn't until recently that we switched our approach. Like these e-diaries are source. Uh, in your written response, okay, while we acknowledge the action your site plans to take, your response is inadequate because you did not provide sufficient details about the proposed updates or how you intend to implement these updates. See, this is where the modifying your source. Creo actually makes this easy. You can put an extra checkpoint in there. Was e-diary compliance checked? And you can't skip past that to randomize. So someone's going to have to go remember to say, hey, let me check. Of course, you can just check yes and not actually check just to get past that roadblock, but you're putting more friction in place to like prevent inadvertent randomizations.
So do you think the FDA would be sympathetic to the argument of the PI stating, the sponsor wasn't paying me to do all this extra work?
Nope.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
They don't care about that. You
Yeah.
agreed to the budget. You signed it.
Yeah.
Or sometimes they don't sign it though, but you signed the 1572.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay, another one. Protocol required subjects to have safety imaging procedures performed during the screening and at month 6, month 12, month 18, month 24. We were to be performed at the premature discontinuation visit. The protocol required scans to be conducted during the study to assess study specific safety stopping criteria for bone mineral density. Additionally, the protocol required subjects to be withdrawn if the subject develops clinically significant gynecological findings or conditions on so these are like clearly a safety assessment and they failed to adhere. Specifically, they didn't obtain imaging for one patient at month 12 and month 18. For another one, they didn't get it at month 6 for another one. So they didn't get the imaging, which is like a very important part of the study. These are protocol deviation or violations because they affect safety. You acknowledge that the protocol required study imagings were in place to help ensure safety. You stated many of the issues occurred during the COVID pandemic. Here's the old let's blame COVID excuse. We couldn't get imaging because of COVID. However, we note that the missed safety imaging referenced above occurred before the start of COVID. So they tried to use that excuse, but it was not even COVID wasn't even a thing yet. And you also stated your attempts to encourage compliance, but that your attempts were unsuccessful. So in the corrective action plan, they put that they would establish procedures regarding quarterly compliance checks. Your response is inadequate because you failed to provide details about your corrective action plan. For example, you did not provide details about the process for the proposed quarterly compliance checks or details about the procedures that you will implement. We emphasize failure to conduct the clinical investigation in accordance with the protocol raises significant concerns. And this is not, we're not talking about like an exploratory endpoint that they've decided, hey, you know what, we can't do it. No, this was like a key safety assessment. Don't mess with those.
It's funny because I think that excuse of COVID may have actually worked for a 483 in the first visit by the FDA. It may have carried some weight, not worked per se, but carried some weight. It's the fact that these people have already, this site has already been warned, right? They already had a 483. They've already been out for this issue, and this was well before COVID, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
And now following up, well, now we're going to blame COVID for that same error we were making. So
Yeah,
yeah, it's going to carry no weight. There's no excuse they could make other than just doing as they were told they need to do.
yeah. And that's it. I mean, they said it's not all inclusive. These are like the main things we found on our second or third go around. Who knows how many audits they had prior to this. Well, we got some quiet people like this. I'm telling you, this spicy, man.
You also got a text question.
Man, people are just finding off-channel ways to communicate. Guru Nation, do you think e-diary is part of Source, and if it should be revered, like I learned recently? Curious. All right, let us know. Meanwhile, we got more questions. I got a little bit of time left.
Yeah, you're
I
not
got
going to
jump
get
on.
to. You're going to be late for your meeting.
But let's go through some of these quick. All right. I get the verified clinical trials, Justin. There's nothing to do with that, but I get it. Like sites need that. Now, sites need to make sure it's duplicate subjects. Internal strict QC process prevents such instances, especially during. I know. Shout out Casey Figueroa. She's the new QC person for human clinical trials.
I
Doing
mean,
it
this
remotely.
this is certainly true, but unfortunately, that's not what's going on with this particular investigator. It seems.
Why? Maybe greed, or maybe just it's too hard.
No, it's greed. I mean, that's what my money's on.
A1C glucose level. A1. Yep. A1C. Site staff should review those tablets. Most sites had it in their budget, but not doing it. Oh, there you go. Commenter on my texts. E-diary compliance absolutely important. I agree, and I think if you ask sites, they would say the same. And then if you see how they behave, you would see the opposite. And this is what I'm talking about. This paradigm needs to shift. Maybe we need to put in the budget somehow.
Well,
If
most sites will tell you that the e-diaries are a pain in the ass,
right,
right?
but they're not going anywhere.
And,
They're
and they
actually
will
increasing.
they will approach it in that vein, right?
Well, then they'll have a similar letter at some
Yeah,
point.
potentially.
If you think it's not enough money or no money for the amount of work, says Shirley, the sites are to request for a clinical trial agreement amendment. I agree.
Sure. Yeah.
Checking e-diaries regularly and should be budgeted at the study start. Also be recorded as deviation of no entries. Yeah, duplicate subjects. Our network in South Florida has been working to gain buy-in from our all-independent research sites. Anything should be part of source and reviewed for accuracy. There you go. We take the debt, Carla Veranavas. What a way to end it. I'm done because I gotta jump on this call. What are your closing remarks on all this, Chris?
Yeah. Interesting. Again, I just find it funny that it was Miami.
Are you going back to the site today to implement any changes because of this?
No.
Okay. Fair enough. I think we already have, but I'm modifying Creo. Shout out to Creo, one of our sponsors. I'm modifying Creo to make sure like we have more checkpoints in place.
So to everybody that's watching, the reason I find it humorous about Miami is Dan and I work on bringing studies to sites, and by far and away, the area that's excluded from research the most is Miami. We work directly with sponsors. Hey, do you have any sites in your network that would be interested in this particular study? We're not looking for Miami sites. You ask them why, and they either have one of two reasons: fraud, or we already have enough Miami sites.
Right.
It's one of those two reasons. So, and
And
they
it's
do
not fair.
legit say fraud. So that's why I find it funny.
And it's not fair to the. There are plenty of excellent sites in Miami
Sure.
and
But
all through
they
Florida.
still grouped right in, unfortunately.
Yep. See, Carla says I had to add several checkpoints in Creo as well. This is what I'm currently doing now. Between now and the end of the year for the studies we have, that's what I'm trying to do. All right, I gotta jump on. Actually, a call with Creo. Do you want to join me, Chris?
No, I know nothing of Creo.
Perfect. I'll send you the Zoom link.
No, I don't want to jump on.
All right. Well, thank you, Chris. I'll catch you later. Thank you,
Thank you,
everybody
everybody.
else. Like, subscribe, comment, share. Bye bye.
Bye bye.